today I learned Mormon Church History Edition.
So President John Taylor, husband to 7 wives, had to live in exile from 1885 until the end of his life in 1887 because he was being prosecuted by the government for being a polygamist, which was illegal.
But that's not all. Then he had a vision in 1886 and said that he saw Joseph Smith and our Lord and Savior, who told him that we needed to keep practicing polygamy, and that the LDS Church not practicing polygamy means it has fallen into apostasy. And so isn't that just special?
So much for obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law.
Polygamous cult offshoots of the LDS Church, Part 1. This first group, I had literally no idea they existed until I moved here to Utah. They go by a few different names: the Kingstons, the Kingston Clan, the Order, Latter-day Church of Christ, Davis County Co-op. There's a few different names they go by. They were founded by Ortel Kingston in the 1930s after the LDS Church that they were a part of decided to denounce polygamy. And they were excommunicated by the church because they formed their own group and just started to practice the law of consecration and polygamy in Bountiful in the Woods Cross area. And so this group believes in the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, Pearl of Great Price, basically all of the foundational Mormon LDS texts are the foundation of their current religion, just adding in polygamy. Polygamous cults, offshoots of the LDS Church, Part 2. So, the Kingstons believe in pretty much everything that the modern Mormon Church believes in, except for polygamy. So, the interesting thing about these people is there's about 8,000-ish members, they're estimating at this point. They have their holdings, because they're a business and they own a lot of companies here in Utah, their holdings are in the $300 million range. They love incest. They love underage marriage. They are super racist and only believe in basically bloodlines and keeping bloodlines clean. And they're abusive to children, childhood neglect, abuse, all over the place, underage marriages, all over the place. Overall, they're just a horrible, horrible group. So in talking about groups that are offshoots of the LDS Church who separated themselves from the LDS Church mainstream, started their own groups and practiced polygamy based off of the LDS Church teachings, based off of Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, John Taylor, all the former prophets of the LDS Church. They use their teachings and their doctrine. They use the Book of Mormon and Doctrine and Covenants, and they use the LDS text to justify polygamy and what they're doing, to justify abusing children, to justify abusing women, to justify incest, to justify all of these things. And so I think we need to remind ourselves not to undermine the importance of these other offshoot groups, because they're essentially practicing Mormon doctrine in its true original Joseph Smith form.
Okay, this one is a question for my fellow RMs. For the majority of my mission in a third world country, I was in leadership positions, and I ended up doing a lot of baptismal interviews. We also had a lot of sister missionaries, and a lot of them tended to teach and baptize more often children from ages about 9 to 13. On every single interview that I did with a child, I skipped the law of chastity question because I thought it was weird and I never questioned it. I did, however, never tell anybody that. Did other people skip that question because they thought it was weird? I just don't understand why we need to ask children about inappropriate things.
XMO friends, we have another question for you today. So we are curious, for those of you who watched the Scientology documentary series that Leah Remini did, because we watched it when we were members still and active in the church, and we thought it was so culty and so painfully obvious that Scientology was this horrible organization.
I just remember thinking, how could they abuse their tax exempt status and bully the IRS to be able to get it? And how could they abuse their members emotionally and physically and coerce them into abortions and all these terrible things. I didn't see it then, but now I find it so ironic that we were so appalled about the Church of Scientology. Got some high chews, ready to settle in.
Hi friends. So I have kind of a bit of a loaded question for my ExMo community. I've kind of seen a little bit of a pattern and being open and vulnerable, as I often am in this space. I have a parent who has narcissistic personality disorder, and I was abused as a child. And I'm curious because I kind of see a few, like more than a few of my friends in the church who had parents who either were abusive or one of them had some type of narcissistic personality disorder. And so I'm wondering if you're willing and open to share with me if that's something that you've experienced. I'm kind of wondering if there's some kind of, maybe not a relationship, or maybe some kind of connection between these two things. So I'm in school for social work, so I'm just curious. It seems to be like this crazy false assumption that if you leave the LDS church or the Mormon church, if you leave, it's because you took the easy way out, or you wanted to sin, or your testimony just wasn't strong enough, or you just didn't have enough faith. So here's my question to my ExMo friends out there is, how much time, effort, and energy did you spend researching, praying, spending time in the temple, researching? How much time did you spend before you ultimately came to the conclusion that you couldn't stay in the church anymore?
There are a lot of things that I've had to give up because of it.
You guys, this has been on my mind tonight, and this just like sums it up perfectly. Like, my life would have been so much simpler if I could just continue to believe in the church, and if I could just set aside all the things that, are terrible, if I could just move on with my life and just continue to believe it. But I can't, but my life would be so much fucking easier if I could. Like, I wish I could just stay and just like be okay with it and just go on about my life knowing that it's not true. Like, this is the much harder road. So I can't stand when people say that this is the easier route, because this is like so much more difficult.
The victim to recognize a degree of responsibility for abuse.
I am a child sex abuse survivor, and I have a few thoughts on former Apostle Richard G. Scott's words on abuse. First of all, even though I am further along in my healing journey with my abuse, if I would have encountered this quote sooner, it would have been devastating. The person being abused is not to be held accountable or responsible for the abuse being done to them in any way, shape, or form under any circumstance. This is why people don't come forward, and this is why people don't share their stories. I wasn't believed by my closest family members, and this is exactly why people are afraid to announce these things or share these things with people, because this is how it gets received. In many cases, the church protects abusers, and I'm not looking for any apologetic Mormon to come on here and tell me different.
Did you ever feel a lot of pressure just to make shit up?
So I kind of feel like it was taking a handful of darts and just throwing them at the dartboard and hoping that if there was one thing in there, they would latch on and forget about the rest of the things. If I didn't know the person, then I didn't have anything that I could focus on beforehand and maybe feel was more tailored to them and their experience. But if I didn't know them, I would just compensate with saying a lot of things.
Hello, ExMo friends. So I just had a thought. When we were watching the Scientology documentary, we thought about how Scientology disconnects people from their family and the whole disconnection process, and how they, they're not allowed to talk to family members that leave Scientology and things, and how fear-based that is, and how cultish that is. And then I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, okay, the church kind of does that in a here and now sense, but they also do that in a afterlife sense. So Scientology says you can't be with your family here and now, and you're denied that now, whereas Mormons say you can't be here and now, like you can't be with your family in the afterlife, and so the consequence is just later rather than here and now. So interesting parallels. Our stake president giving us weird sex advice, part 1. Okay, so when you're Mormon, you have your interviews before you get married to essentially be able to get married. And so you interview with 2 leaders in the church, and they ask you questions separately. It's the temple interview questions to make sure you're worthy to go to the temple and get married. So once that happened, our stake president decided to share some really strange advice.
I'll never forget the exact term he used because I thought it was so weird. He encouraged us not to be tempted to use tools in the bedroom.
Tools, guys. Tools. So, and yeah, gross. No.
Sex advice from our stake president, part 2.
Okay, so the reasoning our stake president gave for not encouraging us not to use tools in the bedroom was that he also referred to them as machines or machinery. And he said that people who use these type of things in the bedroom become too reliant on the machinery and not on their spouses. So I'm not aware of anything written in church handbooks, doctrine, anywhere about not being able to use sex toys as Mormons. I don't know where that's written. I don't even know if that's a thing, but this is what our stake president told us. So if you have ever been told something similar, we'd be interested to hear.
In short, don't be buzzing the devil's doorbell. This is actually a really interesting question because we both live in Utah currently, but we both grew up in Colorado. We even went to the same high school.
So ultimately, there are some pretty big differences. In Colorado, there's a lot less like of the judgy vibe, and being Mormon, you're in the minority religiously speaking, and so there's not like this superiority complex with being the majority religion in the state. And so it is a little bit different in that sense. However, a lot of it is still the same.
Even with the culture being a lot different, I was still a black sheep. There was a lot of things that I liked that weren't generally accepted by part of the church. A lot of the music I listen to is come under a lot of criticism by my family members and other members of the church.
Someone asked questions about Mormons and sex education, so let's jump in. So I have to address, a lot of Mormons live in Utah, right? And so it's important that we look at some of the laws in Utah and what that means for sex education here. This happened just this year in Utah's legislative session. They shot down a bill that would have required teaching consent in classes. In Utah, sex education is abstinence only. There is no talk of intercourse other than at a very, very basic level, and no contraceptives whatsoever, and obviously no consent. And this is a problem because in Utah, rape is the only violent crime index higher than the national average. So the responsibility falls on the parents to teach sex education. And in my personal experience here in Utah, that doesn't happen very often. Kids go to their friends, to the internet, and to porn to find the information that they're looking for. So I'm curious, if you're Mormon, what was your sex ed experience like? More embarrassing things we believed as Mormons.
So the main people of the Book of Mormon, the Nephites, were visited by Jesus after he was resurrected. Just like he did in Jerusalem, he set apart 12 apostles and called them and gave them the priesthood. Before his departure into heaven again, he blessed them all with the desires of their hearts, and 3 of them decided that they wanted to remain on earth until his next coming and preach his gospel.
This is on LDS.org, the website. We're not making it up, I promise. But they believe that those people, those 3 Nephites, are still on the earth today, and that all kind of magical experiences happen because they're still chilling here, and so you might have run into them.
Basically, you could ask anybody in the church and they will know somebody who knew someone who had a cousin whose grandma had an experience with these 3 Nephites, guaranteed.
So a lot of you have asked about Mormons performing baptisms for the dead, and yes, that happens. Mormons also perform all the other ordinances that they do for living members, for deceased people by proxy. So as an example, my grandmother wasn't a member, and I decided that I wanted to do her work, is what we call it, in the temple after she passed away. So all this information is kept online so people can keep track. And so this is my grandmother's page. And so as you can see, it's kind of cut off. We have baptism, confirmation, initiatory, endowment, sealing to parents, and sealing to spouse. And as you can see, I completed all of these things for her. So that's why family history is so crucial in the Mormon Church, because that information presents the Mormon Church with people who need their work done. And so that's why you see so much of an emphasis on family history work.
Weird Stuff We Believe as Mormons, Part 3. Patriarchal blessings are an outline of all the blessings that you're supposed to receive from God in your lifetime that is predicated on your faithfulness to God and His commandments.
There's a lot of social weirdness in the church around patriarchal blessings. Like Aunt Lydia talked about in one of her videos, it's like the more valiant or amazing you are as a member, the longer your patriarchal blessing would be. So if you got 2 full pages like we did, oh my gosh, we're so valiant, look at us now.
Most people get them when they're around 16 years or older, and it seems to be something that kind of anchors people in the faith.
So basically, it's like Mormon fortune telling from an old white guy that just happens to make it really ambiguous.
Hashtag confirmation bias.
How to enter the Mormon temple.
So here we have 2 temple recommends that we were in the process of getting completed last year and never ended up finishing them. In order to obtain a valid temple recommend, you have to complete personal interviews with your local leaders, that is the bishop and the stake president above him.
So in order to get one of these, when you interview with the bishop and the stake president, they have to ask you questions.
Some of the questions in the interview have to do with some of the following.
Do you drink coffee or tea?
Do you subscribe to any beliefs that are contrary to the teachings of the church?
Do you keep the law of chastity and not touch yourself?
Do you have faith in and sustain the living prophets and apostles and general authorities and local authorities?
And do you pay 10% of your income to the church?
Even during a global pandemic and economic crisis.
Mormon Modesty Reviews, Part 1. So let's start with this one. I had many of these in my closet. They are called maxi skirts. And they go all the way down to the floor and almost touch the floor. Some of them might touch the floor. So this is a 5 out of 5 star Mormon outfit. This one is so Mormon it hurts. The cap sleeves, and most importantly, the leggings under the dress. Even though the dress is long enough, leggings under there just to be safe. This is 5 out of 5 stars Mormon outfit. If you've ever been in a Mormon church building during a sacrament service, you've seen this outfit. No skin whatsoever. Head to toe, boots, scarf, covered. 5 out of 5 stars, ultimate Mormon outfit right here. And last but not least, the trend Mormon women have been rocking for decades, wearing a t-shirt under an inappropriate dress that would be inappropriate without the t-shirt. 5 out of 5 stars.
Okay, so we have received this comment more than one time, so we just want to address it. Both of us went to temple prep classes before we attended the temple for the first time.
Both of us were taught by different temple prep teachers and went at different times.
Doing a simple search on the Gospel Library app from the church will not yield a result for the exact term new name, including in results from preparing to enter the Holy Temple, the student or instructor manual. If you were taught about the new name by your temple prep teacher, that was a prerogative of their own, and it was not
sanctioned by the church.
Sanctioned by the church.
Also, you will be called this name technically in heaven, because the apostles have stated that men call their wives by these names to resurrect them on Resurrection Day.
Temple prep class does not teach anything specific about any of the goings-on in the temple aside from baptisms of the dead.
What Mormons believe about the afterlife, Part 1.
So basically, Mormons believe that after you are judged, you will be sent to one of 3 degrees of glory. There's also outer darkness, which we will talk about in a separate video, its own. The first degree of glory is the celestial kingdom. This is where the murderers, idolaters, adulterers, etc. will go after they are judged for their works. The second is the terrestrial kingdom. This is where good people that never received the light or gospel of Christ will go. The highest degree of glory is the celestial kingdom. This is where the people who are members of the Mormon Church will go. In order to get there, you have to be baptized, you have to receive your endowment and be married in the temple, and each of these ordinances, as they're known, corresponds to a level within the celestial kingdom.
Because we fell away and left the Mormon Church, most people believe we're going to outer darkness or the celestial kingdom. Let us know which one you think you're going to. By far, our most requested topic has been Mormon hell or outer darkness, so let's jump in.
So Mormons believe in two different types of hell. The purgatory-like spirit prison that happens before you are resurrected, and the eternal damnation known as outer darkness. Spirit prison is reserved for those people who die in their sins during this life. The people that inherit eternal damnation or outer darkness are Lucifer, the devil, the spirits that were cast out with him in the beginning, and the people who commit the unpardonable sin, and these people are known as the sons of perdition.
So Mormons believe that only a small amount of people will actually be sent to outer darkness. There's also controversy amongst the church, amongst prophets, on whether or not women can be sons of perdition. Brigham Young and Joseph F. Smith said they couldn't, but Wilford Woodruff said that there might be women.
So chances are you aren't sent to super VIP hell.
In fact, 8 hours ago, this story broke. And it turns out the LDS Church is doing a survey, an internal survey for members between ages 18 and 35. So, what do they want to know? Fortunately, someone took screenshots so we know part of the things that they're asking. For example, this one, a few of these talk about gender roles, a family proclamation to the world, specifically the role of women in the church and how women are treated differently than men. And then members have to rank how much this bothers them, from a great deal to I don't have this concern. It also talks about women's roles in the temple, and it also talks about the doctrine of polygamy, which I like to say bothers me a great deal.
This definitely isn't the first time that the church has conducted surveys on topics that are generally considered sensitive. The church states that all of this is doctrine, yet they're interested in how much it bothers people.
Let's play Mormon Pictionary.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, here's the first one.
A horse.
Try this one.
A win for Satan?
Okay, how about this?
Anti-Mormon lies for sure.
Oh boy, okay, this is the last one, and then I'm giving up.
Ooh, Angel Moroni. CES Letter is a common catalyst for the faith unraveling of people who formerly were members of the Mormon Church.
The CES Letter was written by an amazing human named Jeremy Runnels. You can find it at cesletter.org and read the whole thing for free. But the gist of it is Jeremy, as a member of the church at the time, had questions about church doctrine, church history, and sought guidance from church leaders to try to help him answer his questions.
Many of these questions had to do with unsavory details of the founding of the church and a lot of inaccuracies in the Mormon doctrine. The letter never received a response.
The church accused Jeremy of apostasy and held a disciplinary council, for which Jeremy resigned from the church officially. We're going to help break down the CES letter into smaller chunks for those of us that have been asking, so we can share some of it with you. I want to go on a Mormon mission. There's some things that you should know.
Let's take a look at the handbook real quick. Use only dignified language and never use slang.
You need to wake up at 6:30 a.m. every day, and it's lights out by 10:30 every night.
You're going to be working every day, including Sundays and holidays.
No swimming whatsoever.
No television, no movies, no radio, and no internet except for missionary authorized purposes.
No listening to music that merely entertains or has romantic lyrics or overtones.
And when you do listen to that music, you cannot use headphones because it separates you from your companion and they might not be able to hear what you're listening to.
Also, no porn and no touching yourself.
You should also never be alone with the opposite sex or allow your companion to be alone with the opposite sex.
let's talk highlights of the CES letter specifically concerning the Book of Mormon.
The Book of Mormon claims that the principal people in its narrative are direct descendants of Jews. DNA evidence concludes that Native Americans could not have descended from Jews like the church claims.
So the CES letter poses a really good question. On the left, you'll see modern geographical places near Joseph Smith. And then on the right, you'll see names in the Book of Mormon. Is it really coincidence that they're all this similar?
There are other anachronistic words in the Book of Mormon that could not have been possible at the time, such as using the word horse to describe tapirs, or steel that existed in time before blast furnaces. There's also the view of the Hebrews by Ethan Smith that was published in the 1820s that looks extremely similar to the Book of Mormon's ideas.
Hello, friends. We had an interesting experience last night.
We got banned!
So last night, our live was cut short for violating community guidelines. Somebody reported our live in the midst of having a bunch of active TBMs in the chat. To be clear, we did not violate any community guidelines, and it is being appealed as we speak. Here's the thing, we welcome open dialogue and different viewpoints. However, we are also ex-Mormons. We are also ex-Mo content creators. So if you come across our stuff and you don't like it and it's offensive to you, I don't know what to tell you. Don't watch it. Don't look at it. Don't report it and ruin it for everyone else. We don't infiltrate Mormon spaces. We do not go after Mormons. I tag all our videos with ExMo. So if we don't infiltrate yours, don't come infiltrate ours. Do you enjoy getting up at 5:30 in the morning and learning about the Lord? Then you might like seminary.
Growing up as a Mormon in Colorado, I had the privilege of attending early morning seminary every morning before I went to high school. Seminary was a class that was held at 6 o'clock in the morning every single day, and we would talk about gospel topics. A rotating schedule of the year's topics going from the Book of Mormon to the Doctrine and Covenants to the Old Testament to the New Testament, and then on and on. So on top of our 3-hour church meetings every Sunday, I would attend 50 minutes every single day the rest of the week, except for Saturday. One of the big components of seminary was learning the scripture mastery scriptures, where we would have to memorize passages so we could bring them up at a moment's notice.
Getting up to learn about Jesus is what every sleep-deprived teen wants to do.
Somebody made a video claiming that we aren't sent to a degree of glory, but that we are learning to live with God and be comfortable with that. But he didn't allow stitching, so here's my response. I'll just tag you. Right here in the Doctrine and Covenants, it says, receive of his glory and receive the presence of the Son. Also here in the Doctrine and Covenants, talking about receiving the telestial kingdom, they say are thrust down. That kind of sounds like sent. It's no wonder there's a common misconception about being sent to a kingdom of glory, because right here in Preach My Gospel it says, assigned a kingdom of glory. Not to mention your cited source is a talk from Brad Wilcox when he was Department of Teacher Education and not a general authority. What he has to say sounds a lot closer to the philosophies of man mingled with scripture. Not that it matters anyway, because it's all based on the words of a charlatan. Do you really have to pay 10% of your income to get into heaven?
Yes. Yes, you do.
So one of the commandments that the church teaches is that you must pay 10% of your income increase to the church. In the old days, you used to pay it manually in little envelopes like these ones that you see here.
So in order to get into the temple, you have to have a temple recommend. And in order to get that, you have to answer yes to this question. Are you a full tithe payer?
But it wasn't always this way. Over 100 years ago, they taught that eventually we won't need to pay tithing anymore.
Apparently even having $100 billion still isn't enough. In 2012, they added this legal disclosure to all the tithing slips online or physical documents telling you that they get to choose where the money goes and you don't have a say in it.
Don't forget that a lot of the blessings that you might receive are predicated on whether you pay tithing or not.
Mormon Artwork Reviews, Part 1. So this one is a pretty common one that you'll see in a ton of Mormon meeting houses. But the first thing I noticed about this one is Jesus is white, which is not accurate. And it looks like everybody else is white too. And it also looks like we're all going to be playing the trumpet. So I say like 5 out of 10.
This is the one that stares menacingly at you from behind the bishop's desk as he asks you about your worthiness. 3 out of 10.
Oh, look at him reading the gold plates. Little Joseph Smith, bless his little heart. Except I think there might be something missing, like a rock or a hat. 0 out of 10.
Oh yeah, that's more like it. 10 out of 10. This guy looks nothing like a salamander. 0 out of 10.
Hello, friends. We had to get on here and just do a quick little thank you because we woke up this morning to 45,000 of you being here.
This was not an intention, and for that reason we haven't ever really done an update on our followers because we haven't really felt worthy of any number of you following us before.
No, we just got on here to share our story and join the ExMormon community and just feel a part of something significant to us.
It was really just about adding to the conversation with our experiences, because there's a lot of experiences out there, and it's nice to have a sense of community.
But we seriously love you guys so much. Our regulars who come on our live, we love you guys so much. Everybody who asks us questions, supports us, comments on our videos, we are so grateful. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Mormon fun fact of the day, y'all. So the church, the LDS Church, owns a company called Ensign Peak Advisors. And this is an investment management firm that helps them invest their extra tithing dollars. This headline sums it up nicely. They kept the lid on the $100 billion fund for fear that tithing receipts would fall. Oh no. And just to put this in perspective for you, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints investment fund is larger than the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Because Ensign Peak is considered an arm of the church, the super fun part is they largely don't pay U.S. taxes.
What reason does a church need to be invested in companies like Apple and Tesla and Microsoft and make over $20 million on this GameStop stock surge?
To make matters worse, they don't have to disclose what they're spending their money on, so we don't really know if they're spending that money on charitable causes or not. Let's talk the whistleblower complaint that David Nielsen made to the IRS about Ensign Peak Advisors, which is the church's investment company.
Babe, the church contributes tens of millions of dollars to charity every year.
So some of our concerns are how the church uses this money. For example, LDS officials acknowledge that they used these funds to underwrite a mall that they built in Salt Lake City. They also bailed out a church-owned insurance company that was going under.
If you scale the church's donation numbers down to a person with an average salary of $80,000 a year, that would be essentially like donating $35 to charity in a single year.
So they're giving money to charity. Yeah, it's better than $0, but I don't think anybody would be patting me on the back if I donated $30 to charity and I had $100 million in a bank.
I believe Jesus' words were, "Sell all thou hast and give unto the poor." Because the culture in the Mormon church is that every young man should serve a mission, a lot of parents offer like crazy incentives in order to get their kids to want to go on a mission. For instance, I've heard of people like buying their kid a car if they served a honorable full-time mission just so that they could get them to make the choice for themselves. So I wanted to hear what other people, if you have an experience with some crazy incentive just so that your parents could say that you served a full-time mission. So stitch this, comment, do whatever. Let's talk about Joseph Smith's first vision. The account of Joseph Smith's first vision was one that I memorized while I was on my mission so that I could give a dramatic reading of it while teaching investigators. As you can read here in a talk by Gordon Hinckley, it's pretty important to the church because it proves that it's either true or false.
As it turns out, heavenly visions weren't that uncommon in Joseph Smith's time. It's also suspicious that a man named Norris Stern gave this account of a heavenly vision that he had in 1815, which was 5 years before Joseph Smith had his heavenly vision experience. So there are some interesting parallels between the two. Both talk about having a near-death experience, both are interrupted by a light, both see the Father and Son in bodily form, which is very specific, both are unable to describe the appearance, and both use the word pillar in their description. Joseph Smith's First Vision, Part 2.
So aside from the eerie similarities between other accounts of heavenly visions and Joseph Smith's first visions, there are the differing accounts that were written at different times.
So Joseph Smith says the first vision occurred in 1820. The interesting thing is, being that it is a massive event that I would think he would want to share with other people given his nature, he didn't publish it until 1842. There were major church publications being written and shared at the time, and interestingly enough, the first vision wasn't shared in any of them.
There were a few different written accounts of this vision, but over the iterations of the account, many things changed, including who exactly appeared to him, which is the most damning thing to me. Joseph Smith himself wrote 4 of the accounts that the church recognizes, and nobody seems to have a problem with the discrepancies. Oh, hello. Didn't see you there. So yesterday there was an update to the church handbook with some rather interesting new parts.
So one of the first interesting updates is on vaccines. So lots of members in the Mormon Church are absolutely adamant against getting the COVID vaccine, and so they added this little section that encourages members to get vaccinated, and interestingly enough, their prophet also got vaccinated.
They also added a section about affinity fraud, which I would assume is in response to the growing MLM community here in Utah, but I think it can ironically be applied to some other organizations.
Probably thanks to the Lori and Chad Daybell controversy, they've also added a section on extreme preparation or survivalism, saying that your efforts to prepare should be motivated by faith, not by fear.
They also thought letting young single adult men be counselors in the bishopric was a good idea.